Fred, today let's discuss the Kecksburg UFO case. I know we've had Stan Gordon on to discuss it, and that was what, like our second or third episode?
Right.
And I think he was actually on for 2 episodes. But there's the Kecksburg story, and then there's the Kecksburg legend, and the Kecksburg urban legend. So let's go through this, because I came across some additional information on this recently.
And also the Kecksburg Roswell of the East.
Yeah, well, you know, we talked about Carbondale, right?
Right.
There's a lot of questions about Carbondale and a lot of questions about Kecksburg, but we know something came down.
Right.
So, you know, to go over, you know, what happened at Kecksburg for the people that aren't familiar, and they should be because they watched our episode.
Right.
But it was December 9th, 1965. It was about 4:45 p.m. and something is coming down through the sky. It's on fire, so it's burning, and it's glowing green. And it's coming over Canada, heading southeast. But it makes 2 turns. Kind of turns before it got to Cleveland and turns again around Pittsburgh. Really, when you look at the trajectory, it had turned, really, I think, to avoid the city. So there was some ability to control this thing. And it seemed to avoid the population centers. It was glowing green. So it kind of, and it doesn't really crash into the woods. It seems to be able to slow down and then crash into the woods at maybe 100 miles an hour.
Well, didn't it go around and come back?
Well, that's something that they added later, saying that, well, and it could be perception too, that they think it circled and came back, which I question whether that is, if that's what it really did. But then what happens is about 40 minutes later, the military shows up. So by 5:30, you know, 5:30 to 6 p.m., you get military showing up. And based on what the witnesses said, there were about 24 Army people, 3 from the Air Force and 4 from NASA. And witnesses down there have all said that there was a large military contingent down there. Some people said it was kind of an acorn-shaped object, you know, almost like a space capsule, almost like a triangular type look to it. It was laying on its side, half buried in the dirt. And people saw some sort of symbols around the base of it. They were told by the military people there to leave because the area could be radioactive. They actually commandeered a woman's house. And they used it as a base camp working out of there. And they saw 4 guys in white radiation suits with a mask carrying a box into the woods and then carrying something out of the woods at that point. Now, what was interesting, the woman, when she went, because they were using her phone, all of that was scrubbed from her phone bill. None of those phone calls, long distance calls, anything showed up on her phone bill, which was really interesting. So then they put it on a flatbed, right? And they took it out. There were witnesses. They put a tarp over it. So basically, then you get the story. Well, I guess there was other things that happened. A witness came forward years later saying that it was brought to Wright-Patterson, and he was delivering bricks. And the bricks were, I don't know, they for high heat or whatever. Radiation. And while he was delivering the bricks, he kind of moseyed into this other room and saw the triangle, kind of bell-shaped object. But he saw a gurney with a hand, 3-fingered hand sticking out. So he's got 4 fingers. A 3-fingered scaly arm, and it was covered on a gurney.
He also said that he was watching them trying to get into it. If you remember.
There were guys trying to open it, trying to figure out how to get in?
They were cutting it, they were doing everything they could. Then he came back in a little bit later. That's when he seen the alien on a gurney, or whatever was on a gurney.
And you know, that part that kind of and they just warned him, and he went on his way.
Right.
That part doesn't jive with what we know from other UFO cases. When you run into the military, and if they were doing something secretive like that, I seriously doubt this guy would have ever left that.
I don't think that he actually even walked in there, because they probably had guards standing outside.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unguarded area that you have an alien and a spacecraft, and it's unguarded, and then you're just told, okay, don't tell anybody, go home.
Right.
That part just sounded very strange to me. So.
And then also, when you said there about the flatbed, they loaded it on a flatbed. Now, if it was laying in a creek, okay?
In the middle of the woods.
Yeah, how far did that truck go down in there?
Yeah.
I mean, the truck wouldn't have went all the way down to the creek, I don't think.
Well, you would have had to.
Right.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but even if the creek, I mean, how did he get that thing on the back? How'd they get the thing on the back of the truck?
It's a good question. How did you lift it up?
Right.
Well, I guess if you got 24 Army guys, you know, I mean, you could technically lift, 150, 200 pounds. You know, so I guess they could have lifted a 500-pound a 5,000 pound. I mean, you would have needed some sort of gurney, something to lift it, because it becomes awkward, you know.
But if you remember Kecksburg a few years ago or last year, it was stated that a second truck went down into the woods with a hoist on it and picked it up and put it on a truck.
Well, that's one of the problems with the Kecksburg story, is that when you question it, they seem to come up with explanations after the fact, after they've had a chance to think about it. But we do know that something came down, because it was tracked by Canadian radar. Right. And here's the other thing: American radar says they never tracked it. No, come on, Canada tracks it, we don't.
They know exactly where it landed.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you tell me a missile could have been coming over Canada, Canada's tracking, and we're not? That's impossible. That story's impossible.
And also, how did NSA get there?
How did they get there in less than an hour? Right. You know, in order to get there that quickly, it had to be tracked. Now, we did at that time have some bases locally, the Nike sites, where we had people that were with, and that's where they would have to be. To get there that quickly, they had to be within
so you take Oakdale,
30 miles.
Oakdale.
Yeah.
Okay, now Oakdale, you could get on a turnpike or get on 30 and get up there. But also, at 5:30, everybody there would have been on their way home. How long would it have taken them before they could actually get back, get dressed, get all their stuff ready, and get up there? You're looking at 2 or 3 hours there. Yeah. These guys was there, Johnny, on the spot, so they actually was watching that thing come down, and they knew exactly where it landed.
Yeah, they had to have been tracking it. So then, you know, with the story, and I've done the Kecksburg TV specials on Discovery Channel, History Channel, 3 or 4 different times, and you know, so really the theories come out that one, it was a UFO, because people described it, said it was a UFO. And then you get the story of, you know, there's also another story of a state policeman who climbed on top, hit it with its nightstick, and it replied.
No, that was a military guy.
Oh, it was a military, not state police?
No, the story was, they called it a swaggle stick. Okay. He got on top of it and he started hitting it, and a hand came out. Okay. That was the story there. That was also talked about up at Kecksburg last year. And
that reminded me a lot of the end of War of the Worlds. Remember at the end when the hand, the arm, and the long fingers come out. So, so you know, was it a UFO? The crazy thing is, though, is that the official explanation given by Project Blue Book at the time, which is still on the books from the Air Force, was that this was a meteor, and they only sent 3 Air Force personnel down. Now, what meteor can change direction, slow down before crashing, and tell me of another meteor crash that you sent a flatbed and military to get? You don't do that for a meteor. Why would you go do that for a meteor?
Maybe the name of it was Meteor.
Meteor Road.
I mean, you know, they said it was a meteor. They're not lying. I mean,
yeah, that was. But you know, the meteor explanation makes no sense. No. But see, that's what Project Blue Book was back then. You know, and then you get the Bell Project. Right. You know, that was the other explanation. It was Nazi technology that we got at the end of World War II. Right. And we continued, and there is documents, Project Paperclip.
Right.
that we got a
brought it
lot
in.
of our stuff from the Nazis,
Right.
and so could it be the Bell? It could, it could be the Bell.
Well, yeah, it could have been sent up from down Canaveral, and then they was watching it, and then it malfunctioned or something. That
Yeah.
came in.
So I mean, it could be something that was our military. Could be the Bell Project. So what happens though is, I think it was early of 2015. I get contacted by a guy by the name of Owen Eichler, who's a engineer, and he says he can explain Kecksburg. So I said, well, tell me. So he tells me his story, and I kind of said, all right, let me think about it. And then I was reading a book by Major Kehoe from 1973, and in there it was talking about green meteors over New Mexico. And I said, well, wait a minute, this Owen guy was just talking about Kecksburg, which glowed green,
Right.
and in the late 50s, they had these green meteors that Dr. La Paz was looking at. And I said, you know what, there's a connection here. Because I felt that what was being seen in New Mexico was the testing of some technology
Right,
that we had
right,
that
right.
Owen says was the Kecksburg crash.
Right.
Makes sense, They never did explain the green meteors over New Mexico. So I contacted Owen and I told him, tell me your story again. And he did. And I said, you know what? This makes a lot of sense. But I said, Owen, you're going to have to answer every single question about Kecksburg. So we went point by point by point on this, and I said, how did this happen? How did that happen? So what we did was we wrote a research paper. This is it, dozen pages or more. We wrote a research paper, and that's what I want to talk to you about right now. So you have the Kecksburg story. So then I said to him, okay, how did it turn? Because we actually put a presentation together on this.
Right.
And for the viewers, if you come to our November 19th UFO conference at the Ramada in Greensburg, Owen is going to be there with me.
Right.
We're going to present this, and you can see the actual PowerPoint slides. So, I said to him, well, how did it turn? Because we have the map here showing where it should have hit and how it turned. And he said that this was a GE Mark II reentry vehicle. It was basically a space capsule. He said that what got my attention was that it had a copper alloy heat shield. Copper glows green.
Right.
So that was the part that got my attention. That was the heat shield. So I said, okay, well, the big question is, how did it turn? And he said, what it has is in it, there's like this weight, they're able to shift the weight. When you shift the weight, because it's shaped like this, it skims off the surface. And that's how, when they wanted it to get away from Cleveland and wanted it to get away from Pittsburgh, they were able to send it a signal and make it turn. So that proves that what NASA and the Air Force said that they weren't tracking it is a lie. Because if you sent it a signal, you were obviously tracking it. And if it was ours, you were able to make it turn. So, and there's actually pictures of it in the night sky that night where you could see the contrail that it left. So, so then, there's a notarized statement from Jerry Bedders, who was a local musician.
Right.
He drew it, and it looks exactly, like the cone-shaped object on the trailer.
Right.
So then you look at this GE Mark II, looks exactly like it. Looks exactly like it. And one of the questions I asked down in Kecksburg was, I looked up the flatbed trailers from 1965, and they were more narrow than the trailers today. So some of their people down there said, oh, this thing was 10 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet wide. Well, the trailers were barely 7 feet back then. So the question was any of the Kecksburg objects sticking out? Oh, no. Matter of fact, one guy said it was really kind of not that big, and it looked like a couple of suitcases sitting there. It wasn't very large, but others said it was 10 to 12 feet. Well, we know that the trailers, let's say, were 7 feet, so it couldn't be more than 7 feet. So what's the size of the GE Mark II capsule? Right? It's just under 6 feet. fits perfectly on that trailer.
Yeah.
And you know, a 6 foot by 6 foot on the trailer, you see it from a distance, could look like a couple of suitcases, not that big.
Right.
So, you know, I think that kind of answered one of the questions there. So then, you know, we looked at the, you know, okay, these other things that were said to come down, the Nazi Bell and the Cosmos 96, because that was what they were looking at. Was this the probe from Russia that was sent up to Venus? And when you look at it, which again, if they come to our conference, they'll see it. When you look at what it looks like, that is not aerodynamic.
Right.
It could not
have made the turns.
No, and actually what happened was NASA and Russia said that it broke apart in space over Canada and just kind of like, you know, like space debris came down on fire and was scattered in this, you know, wooded area. There was no even point to make a recovery. It didn't, and that's what happened 13 hours prior to the Kecksburg. So we know it wasn't Cosmos 96. As for the Bell project looks exactly like, a lot like the GE Mark II satellite. So it could have been the Nazi Bell, but there's no real evidence that we've ever got that working. So it's a possibility, though, that's what it was. So then one of the things, too, was here's a picture. You see the woman, and that's the size of it. Well, they reconstructed it in 1990 or 91 for Unsolved Mysteries, a TV show, right? They made the model, laid it on its side. That's not 8 feet. That's more like 6 by 6.
Right.
And it's exactly the size of this. And on its side looks exactly like it. It looks exactly like it, you know? So, one of the things that came up was, well, on the base, there was some writing, you know, Egyptian, Cyrillic, whatever it was. And one of the things that Jim Romansky mentioned was that it had a 5-pointed star on it, right? So I'm saying, wow, why would aliens put a 5-pointed star? Like, who uses a, if you're going to draw the sun, it's round and you put straight lines coming out of it, right? Like the sun. You know, you don't make a 5-pointed star. A 5-pointed star is a military symbol that both the Army and Air Force used
at that time, right?
So we go and look it up. And the one thing that Romansky said was, is a 5-pointed star with a circle in the center. So here is the military symbols. 5-pointed star with a circle, 5-pointed star with the circle, Army and Air Force. It exactly matched up to what was seen. And, you know, one of the things with Romansky, too, was right around this same time, I think it was before, maybe it might have been afterwards, he actually got arrested for holding up the Latrobe Bank. So here's your main witness, you know, and, you know, he atoned, he did whatever he had to do, but this is one of your main witnesses on this, you know? And he did, I guess he did whatever he had to do to atone for that. So,
but I think still with the writing in that, I don't think they've really seen it all.
Oh, it's half on the ground.
Yeah, there was probably a lot more stuff that they could have seen it. They could have, you know, really made, you know, something about it. But
so then what I did was I said, okay, you know, we sent the Voyager probe out to deep space, so if extraterrestrials come across it, you know, we sent them a message. It was on a gold plate. And I said, okay, so how did we show our solar system? Did we show a 5-pointed star for our sun? No, we showed a circle with rays coming out and then the 9 planets, right? I think back then we still had 9, we didn't have 8. And that's exactly what's on that plate that was sent out. So I said, you know, scientifically, aliens would not use a 5-pointed star. So
no, why would they? I mean,
no. So I think that that we kind of explained that. So what we were able to find out basically is that this GE Mark II is a spy satellite. So this is after the Gary Powers situation where they captured a U-2 spy plane. And so what they went to was sending up satellites. They'd launch them from Johnson Island and Southern California, and they launched them south. So as the Earth is spinning, they are launching it over the South Pole, and it would come around over Russia, take pictures, then eject the camera system. The satellite drops into the ocean, the camera system has a parachute, and the Navy picks it up.
Wow.
That's what they were doing. So I said, okay, so I told Owen, what you need to do now is you need to find me a GE Mark II that's unaccounted for. And he goes, there's plenty of them. It's not, there are plenty that they don't have a disposition on, So I said, well, send me the list. I went through it, and on December 7th, Kecksburg is the 9th.
Yeah.
December 7th is a launch from Johnson Island. It initially is a half-mile off mark, so we know it didn't go where it was supposed to go. It starts to go off. And it ejected its camera system that they saw, but they didn't account for it. There's no disposition on the capsule.
Right. So
the problem and the criticism of that one, when I mentioned it in the article, was that was suborbital. Okay, I think you have to go 90 miles to be orbital. This was like 70 miles. So I said, okay, I said to Owen, how long does it take to come down? He goes, well, they can come down in an hour, or they can come down in 2 or 3 days. I said, well, give me an example. And he said the Gemini, I don't know if it was Gemini 1, it was Pioneer, 1958. Pioneer 1 was 71 miles. It took 43 hours to come down. Orbital is 99 miles, okay? So it took 43 hours to come down, and it was suborbital. So was this one on the 7th. And I said, well, okay, what's the time difference from the launch to Kecksburg? 39 hours. Because you got the time difference too, because it's out in the Pacific. And we actually calculated it was 39 hours. So we know a similar object stayed up 43 hours. So I don't know if it was the one from the 7th, but it could be. So what you got is a U.S. spy satellite being launched, taking pictures, and it's totally secret because it was right after the Gary Powers incident. So we know this one went offline. It could have come down, and there's a quote actually from a general here. So I said, okay, how do you make it maneuver? And I told you that they shift the weight. Yeah. So, it's one of the funny things is that the Russians said that they thought something collided with Cosmos 96. You gotta wonder if one of these satellites, maybe the one from the 7th, didn't clip it and take it out. But there's a quote from a general here that basically says that these objects, these things were maneuverable. Here, these were U.S. Air Force missions that evaluated reusable, maneuverable reentry vehicle designs that might be able to fly to a precise location on Earth. So that's basically, now you know that it's maneuverable. It glows green when it comes in because it has the copper heat shield. And the other kicker on it, which I think is very important, is that these had a small atomic generator in it for power. Right. So think about this. This thing, you can't have it hit the U.S. Steel building, so you maneuver it. It crashes in the woods. You got to get that atomic generator out of there. That's what the 4 NASA guys were doing when they went in radiation suits and a lead box. They were removing the atomic generator so then they could put it on a flatbed and get out of there. It makes total sense. Every aspect of what happened at Kecksburg can be explained if this was the U.S. spy capsule with an atomic generator.
But I think it's been told, the story's been told so many times the other way that nobody really wants to listen to what, we're saying here.
Well, people like entertainment, and that's why, this show, we're going to give you the facts and what really is going on, And then the other thing, Fred, too, you had Project Moondust was in place at that time. They had the protocols, and it was there to recover anything that came down from space, whether it's a meteor, space debris, satellites that crashed, Russian satellites. So the protocol was totally there. So, I hate to burst the bubble, but I'm convinced that the Kecksburg was really a U.S. spy satellite.
I would agree with you after reviewing quite a bit of the information.
Yeah.
I'd have to say the same thing. I mean, you know, the whole thing is, if it was only 6 feet long or whatever, how could the alien even be in it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because then you got shielding and stuff. The alien would have to be about 2 feet, 2 to 3 feet in size.
And not only that, there was no way to get in or out. I mean, there was no.
Yeah, there was no hatch.
Yeah,
Nobody
no hatch
did
or
see a
nothing.
hatch.
I mean,
although it could have been on the other side that was face down. Could have definitely been the hatch. But you know, then I run into all kinds of criticism from all of these experts who say that you can't have a you know, a suborbital come down that late, and you know, and they'd made their own chart showing it go from Johnson Island straight to Kecksburg. That wasn't the way it was launched south. Over the South Pole, came around, took its pictures. The question is though, we had hundreds of these launched, and even if it isn't the 7th, it could have been one of the other ones.
Right.
But they were all landing in the ocean. They got atomic generators in them. They're landing in the ocean. Nobody's recovering them. So we got these little 6-foot capsules at the bottom of the seafloor, spewing radiation, hundreds of them. Nobody has ever said a word about that. We're the first one. We're environmentally concerned.
No. Well, I don't think nobody really ever knew. I mean, the military knew about it, and they ain't gonna say nothing.
They don't care. They're not gonna say that.
Right.
That's how you got the legend of Godzilla, right? It wasn't radioactivity, and you got Godzilla that came out of the ocean. Well, we're dropping these things in the ocean, and nobody ever talks about that.
But I think, you know, when they had the thing up at Kecksburg the last time, you know, some of the people that was actually there that day, their stories really wasn't.
It changed.
I mean,
with time, the stories changed.
kind of interesting.
Well, the other thing too was the reporter. He was visited by a couple of guys and told he couldn't tell the story that he saw because he went down and took pictures. They took his camera and told him to change the story. But they would do that if it was a spy satellite that they didn't want anybody to know about.
Right.
To me, it makes perfect sense. So, you know, we're about out of time, Fred, but, you know, I want to inform the public, Kecksburg was not an alien craft. Unfortunately, makes for a good storyline, but it really was a U.S. spy satellite that came down. So we've debunked, unfortunately. But this is what MUFON does. We explain scientifically what these things are. We investigate and we explain it. Some are real.
No.
But I don't think Kecksburg was. So
I don't either.
Last word, Fred, before we're out of time. You have anything else to say?
I'll let it go right now.
All right, we're done, and so is Kecksburg. Thanks, Fred.